Welcome. Today we explore the American Civil War, not just a series of battles, but a transformation of a nation. We will look at the grand strategies, the technological shifts, and the human stories that define this era. The war began in 1861 because the United States was two different worlds. The North was industrializing, while the South's economy relied on king cotton and the labor of 4 million enslaved people. When Abraham Lincoln was elected, the South feared their way of life was over and the nation fractured. The Union's grand strategy was the Anaconda Plan. Like a giant snake, they intended to squeeze the South by blockading its ports and seizing the Mississippi River, cutting off the Confederacy from the world and from its own Western resources. In the early years, the North tried to end the war quickly. The Peninsula Campaign was a massive strategic move to capture Richmond by sea. But the War of 1861 was still fighting with 18th century tactics against 19th century weapons, leading to unexpected stalemates. Strategy is also about deception. At Yorktown, the Confederates were outnumbered but used Quaker gunslogs painted black to fool Union General McClellan into thinking they had a massive artillery line. He hesitated for a month, allowing the South to strengthen their defenses. While the North had more men, the South had brilliant, if eccentric, tactical leaders. Stonewall Jackson was a master of rapid movement. He was also a man of odd habits. He refused to eat pepper because he thought it made his left leg weak, and he often rode into battle with one arm raised to balance his humors. The Northern Virginia campaign showed the power of morale and mobility. Jackson's men were called foot cavalry because they marched so fast they could surprise Union forces twice their size, feasting on captured Union delicacies like lobster and fine wine while the North scrambled to react. Not all leaders were geniuses. Ambrose Burnside is a reminder that fashion often outlasts fame. His legendary facial hair gave us the word sideburns, but his military decisions often left his men in the lurch. The Mud March was a strategic disaster that showed the limits of technology. Burnside tried a winter flanking move, but the Virginia clay turned to liquid. The army didn't lose a battle. They simply sank. It took 20 horses to pull a single cannon out of the mire. In 1862, the war's purpose began to shift. Lee invaded the North in the Maryland campaign, hoping to win European support. A Union soldier found Lee's secret plan Special Order 191 wrapped around 3 cigars, changing the course of the invasion. Antietam was the result. It was the bloodiest single day in American history. More importantly, this narrow Union victory gave Lincoln the political victory he needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, turning the war from a struggle for territory into a crusade against slavery. "1863 was the year the tide turned. The Gettysburg Campaign was Lee's final attempt to win the war in the North. It was a clash of 160,000 men at a crossroads town that neither side had originally planned to fight in. The human cost of bad strategy was seen at Gettysburg when Alfred Iverson, Jr. sent his men into a meadow without scouting. They were mowed down so precisely that they were buried in the very line they fell in. To this day, the area is known as Iverson's Pits. The battle was won on the flanks. At Little Round Top, A college professor named Joshua Chamberlain ordered a bayonet charge because his men were out of ammo. This desperate move held the Union line and likely saved the North from defeat that day. Below the hills lay Devil's Den, a nightmare of boulders. This was a new kind of war sharpshooters with long-range rifles picking off officers. It was a terrifying glimpse into the future of modern, impersonal warfare. While Gettysburg was the famous victory, the Vicksburg campaign was the strategic masterpiece. Ulysses S. Grant finally completed the Anaconda Plan by capturing the last Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi, effectively cutting the Confederacy in half. The Union Army was a melting pot. Ivan Turchinov, the Russian Thunderbolt, was a former officer of the Russian Tsar. He brought a European total war mindset to the Union, believing that the only way to win was to destroy the South's ability to support the war. The war moved into the heart of the South. The Army of the Cumberland became the hammer of the Union in the West, pushing through Tennessee and Georgia. This was a war of logistics, dependent on the railroads that both sides fought desperately to control. Sometimes the best strategy involves no fighting. In the Tullahoma campaign, William Rosecrans outmaneuvered the Confederates so brilliantly that he captured a massive region with almost no loss of life. It was a bloodless masterpiece in a very bloody war. But blood was always near. During the Chattanooga campaign, the Union was besieged until they fought their way out in the battle above the clouds. This victory opened the gateway to the lower South and paved the way for the march on Atlanta. In 1864, Grant took command of all Union armies. His strategy was simultaneous movement attacking on all fronts at once, so Lee could not move his troops. The Overland Campaign was a relentless, 24/7 struggle that never let the South breathe. Grant's partner in this was William Tecumseh Sherman. He realized that the South's strength wasn't just its army, but its economy and its will. He famously said he would make Georgia howl to prove the Confederacy could not protect its people. The Atlanta campaign was the key to the 1864 election. If Sherman didn't take Atlanta, Lincoln might have lost his re-election to a candidate who wanted to make peace. Sherman's victory in September ensured the war would be fought to the finish. Then came the March to the Sea. Sherman cut his supply lines and marched 60,000 men through the heart of Georgia, destroying everything of military value. They left behind Sherman's neck-tease railroad rails heated over fires and twisted around trees so they could never be used again. In Virginia, Philip Sheridan was doing the same in the Shenandoah Valley. His strategy was to turn the breadbasket of the Confederacy into a wasteland. By 1865, the South was starving, its currency was worthless, and its railroads were gone. Sheridan's 1864 campaign showed the transition to hard war. It wasn't about capturing cities, but about destroying the infrastructure. This was the blueprint for the wars of the 20th century. In a desperate final gamble, the Confederates tried to draw Sherman back north with the Franklin-Nashville campaign. It was a suicide mission led by John Bell Hood, who was so badly wounded he had to be strapped into his saddle every morning. At the Battle of Franklin, the South's bravery could not overcome the North's technology. They charged into repeating rifles and heavy artillery. 6 Confederate generals died in the carnage, and the Southern Army in the West effectively ceased to exist. Even in the far west, the war was ending. Price's Missouri expedition was a final, failed raid to reclaim Missouri. It ended in the largest cavalry battle of the war, proving that the Union's control of the continent was absolute. By 1865, Sherman was marching north through the Carolinas. The war was coming full circle. The South was exhausted. Their strategy of defense through attrition had failed because the North's industrial and human resources were simply too vast to exhaust. The final blow was Stoneman's 1865 raid, the longest cavalry raid in history. It destroyed the last remnants of the Southern telegraph and rail network, leaving the Confederate government in the dark as their capital finally fell. The war ended at Appomattox. The most incredible irony is the story of Wilmer McLean. The war's first major battle in 1861 happened on his farm. He moved his family 200 miles away to find peace, only for the war to end in 1865, right in his new parlor. He could truly say the war started in his backyard and ended in his front room. The American Civil War didn't just end slavery. It redefined the United States from a collection of states into a single, unified nation. It was a tragedy that forged a new future. Thank you for following this journey with me. Goodbye, and I hope you found this history as fascinating as I do.